Welcome to Relationship Truth Unfiltered, a podcast that ditches destructive tradition and delves into real biblical teaching about relationships. A quick warning, today's episode deals with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Please use your best judgment if the content is appropriate for you, and of course, make sure little ones are not listening. Hey everyone, it's Julie Sedenko, and joining me today is Rose, a member of our Conquer support group who experienced a destructive 20-year marriage filled with manipulation and several forms of abuse. Rose found herself, like maybe you feel right now, physically, emotionally, and mentally spent. But even though life is still not easy, Rose has found a resilience and strength that we both hope will inspire you in the midst of your own circumstances. Rose, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Rose, give me a little bit of the bullet points of the big issues in your marriage over these 20 years, the patterns that made it destructive.
Oh gosh. It started before we were married, but of course I ignored the red flags. I didn't know somebody could be this way.
It's so true. We only want to see the best, right?
Right. And I excused a lot of it. I really realized that I was in for a not good situation, even on our honeymoon, when suddenly anything that I said or wanted didn't matter, and it was his way or the highway. And that continued for the first at least 10 years of our marriage. I knew it was not good, but it felt more difficult. I did not know it was destructive. So as we entered into having kids, I ended up being on bed rest when I was pregnant. And there was like a light switch, a very distinct light switch from when we had been doing really well because we had tried so long to get pregnant, to suddenly he was very hostile. He would yell at me with an anger. He would be aggressive.
Aggressive in what way?
Verbally, but just his attitude towards me. It completely changed. Asking for something like an apple or for him to bring me food from downstairs became a source of contention.
What would he do?
Here's your fruit. Are you happy now? Or here, I just brought you a bunch of fruit. Just pick whatever you want. Like, I don't care. Don't bother me again. I was in shock.
I'm in shock just hearing it.
Frankly, when I was in the hospital and we were filling out birth certificate information, I desperately wanted to leave his name off of it.
Because you knew.
I knew. And I knew I was in a tight spot. I had been through a exhausting pregnancy with bed rest. I just knew that I did not have the strength or the wherewithal or a job.
Yeah.
To get away from it. And I had been told that if you're married, the father's name gets put on their birth certificate just for that fact. And he reviewed the birth certificate right then and there to make sure he was happy with it. I entered into a bit of depression.
I guess. Were you hoping that maybe after giving birth that it would get better?
I knew at that point it wouldn't.
Really?
But I was so exhausted and so like mentally and emotionally spent, plus just the sheer effect of his sudden change and how he talked to me and treated me. I didn't have the strength to get away with it. And I had always been told, you stay married. Like, you don't go into marriage and just flippantly get divorced. It's like, well, what's grounds for divorce? I don't know that that's bad enough. And what would people think?
Mm-hmm. Was this your church?
Yeah, but just the environment. I mean, the church in general environment, not necessarily the church itself, but biblically, I thought you don't get divorced. You stay married. And we had told ourselves divorce is not in our vocabulary from the get-go.
I think that anybody would say, yeah, you don't get divorced flippantly. You don't get divorced because someone burnt the toast or whatever.
Right.
So, of course not. But what Leslie has been trying to teach and get out there is that God does not love your marriage more than the people in it, that you are not less important than your marriage, and that enabling abuse is not submission. It is not biblical. And we've got to get that message out there.
Exactly. I did not know it was abuse. I did not know people were like this. I thought physical abuse was abuse. And because he didn't hit me but one time, he slapped me in the face. And I thought about going to the police at that point. My kid was a toddler, baby toddler-ish age. I thought it was an abuse. It took a process for me to realize that it was actually abuse. And even my mom telling me, why do you let him treat you that way? And I looked at her like, what do you mean? It's like a frog in a pot of boiling water.
There were definitely some very overt actions, but you also say he was covert and manipulative.
Yes, very much so. He works for a Christian organization. He acts like he's a good person. He knows all the good things to say. He grew up going to a Christian school. He knows the lingo, so he can convincingly sound like he's godly, but he's not. It took me a while to realize he might not be a Christian. I can't say what's in his heart, but godly people don't act that way. And it's hard to differentiate between the words and the actions. And it would, it also, I think, typical of abuse, it goes for a time where things are going okay.
Yes.
Not good, but not overtly destructive. And then there's a point in time where something will happen and it's like, oh dear, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And then he acts the next morning like nothing happened. And I'm still reeling in pain. And there was never ever discussion as to what just happened or any resolution. He would grab my wrists after many years of this. He would grab my wrists, and he's much taller than me. So he would look down at me with these intimidating, fierce eyes and block my exit. So while he wasn't necessarily overtly physical, he didn't really beat me or things of that nature physically. There was physical because he would block my exit. He would keep me from leaving the house. He would start working from home to be able to monitor my whereabouts. He would control who I spent time with. He would control how I spent money. Like if I bought something he didn't approve of that was for me, I had to take it back.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm. But he would buy whatever he wanted.
Did you ever challenge him and say, no, I'm not taking it back? What would happen?
I don't think I did. In fact, one birthday, I asked for dish scrubbies for my birthday from my mom.
Shut up. Come
because
on.
I'm dead serious. Because I did not feel like I could buy a dish scrubby because he would say no. And some ordinary person out there is probably going to be like, what in the heck? That's like so blatantly obvious that that's not healthy. But again, the frog in the pot of boiling water, you live like that for so long, it's just what you're accustomed to.
You had to have this inner anger, this boiling resentment inside, did you not?
Yeah. And it got worse and worse. I couldn't do anything right in the kitchen. Didn't matter if it was like a good recipe or whatever. Something was always wrong. He's overly critical.
Well, then why doesn't he cook?
He cut himself out of all household responsibilities. His job was to bring the money in, because I was a stay-at-home mom, to mow and to work on renovations. But if he needed my help, I had to stop what I was doing right then. But he would never help me. And when it came to the kids, he expected the house to be picked up. And when you have multiple children at this point, he expected the house to be picked up all the time. I couldn't.
That's called a pipe dream.
Right? So he expected to be perfectly clean, perfectly picked up, and have dinner ready for him when he came home. And he didn't do anything to help. And I worked like an unhealthy people pleaser. I worked myself to sheer exhaustion on multiple levels. trying to please him so he would no longer call me failure in front of the kids even.
He called you a failure in front of your kids?
Failure as a homeschool teacher, failure as a mom in front of them.
Okay. Tell me, how did that come about?
That happened more towards the end before I stood up. Because there was a point in time where someone was coming over every week or 2 weeks within about a 3-month time span. And so I don't remember what the situations were in that point in time, but I was able to keep the house better picked up. And again, I was working myself to sheer exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the day I was like, now he's going to be happy because of this. I have kept this picked up. He called me a failure again. And it was that point in time where I realized there is no pleasing him. It is futile to continue to work myself to physical and emotional and mental exhaustion, trying to please him and appease him to be worthy of not being called a failure.
What did that word do to you inside?
I knew it wasn't true.
Thank God.
I knew it wasn't true because I knew I was a good teacher and I knew my kids loved it.
Good for you. I'm glad to hear that.
So I knew my marriage was in serious trouble. Lynn, this is like 6-7 years into when I first gave birth.
Now, you talked about how he would grab your wrists and stuff. Did that happen often?
Yes. And he would yell at me and berate me. And there was never any resolution.
I want to ask you this, not in any way judgmentally, because you've talked about it. It's this frog in the boiling water. But a healthy person, if somebody grabs me by the wrists, it's going to happen one time. And there's going to be some consequences. What did you do after he would do that to you?
Well, I'd try to get away from him quickly. I learned to do things without telling him. So I am an honest person, but I ended up having to learn how to hide things.
Well, sure.
For sanity. But there was also a point in time where I was in this process saying, is this grounds for divorce? Like, this is not good. Like he would have an explosion and I'd be like, it could, like, am I going to have to get divorced? And it would scare me.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, so he finally lets go of your wrists. How do you go from there to being able to have sex with him again? What happened in your mind? Like, immediately after he lets go of you, you walk away and then you go fix dinner and everything goes back to normal? Like, do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to understand how you processed that. And again, I don't mean this as you were wrong or bad. I'm trying to wake people up who might be doing the very same thing.
I didn't feel like I had a choice. I would disassociate to a degree. And There was some marital rape involved.
Do you want to talk about that?
I mean, he would force himself on me, wake me up in the middle of the night. And even when I told him no, he would do it anyways. Or he would masturbate and shake the bed to where I couldn't sleep. Even though he had a CPAP and he snored. Mm-hmm. Due to all of this, I ended up going down to the basement bedroom and sleeping.
I hope you locked the door.
I did get a lock and he broke in. Took a bunch of stuff.
Okay. I think we're all listening to this and hurting for you and in a little bit of shock.
There was no safe place in my house.
I just want to talk to the person listening. If anything like this is happening to you, you need to get safe. Rose, this is abuse, and I'm so sorry that you experienced it.
Thank you.
This is probably a good time for a short break. Rose's story, it's hard to hear. It makes me wonder, what is your story? Are you living with abuse or neglect? Like Rose, are you disassociating for survival? Maybe the best question is, how do you want your story to end? I don't mean, do you want a divorce? I mean, do you want to get strong? Do you want to know how to have boundaries and stick to them? Do you want to stop the crazy cycle that's become your life? Because, friend, you can. Leslie's Conquer support group is open until October 4th. If you've heard anything on this podcast, you've heard how this group has changed the lives of countless women in destructive marriages, and it can change yours. Go to leslievernick.com/join and take back some of the control that's been stolen. Decide how your story is going to end. Conquer will close before our next episode airs, so please don't wait. And now let's get back to Rose and see how she went from this abusive situation to taking back control of her own life with the help of Conquer. How did you finally come to realize this is abuse?
Well, on a day when he was blocking my path in a exacerbated way, not just keeping me from leaving the bedroom, but he was trying to keep me from leaving the house. He was blocking all exits and verbally blasting me because I had tried to walk away. I ended up going out to the car and locked myself in, and he came out and was pounding on the car. I drove over to my neighbor, whom I know is a safe place, and sat in their driveway, and I called the police.
Thank God.
And the police came over, and he came to the door and acted like nothing was wrong and started saying that I was mentally ill. And this was the start of a 2-year battle towards divorce. Actually, yeah, a little over 2 years. He would pull the kids very much away from me every chance he had.
In what way?
Literally take them over to someone else's house.
Oh, you're talking like physically take them away from you.
Physically take them away. I was not allowed to be alone with my son. There was a lot of undermining.
Why were you not allowed to be alone with your son?
He wouldn't allow it.
Did he give a reason?
No. He would constantly undermine me with the children, create all kinds of ruckus, and then rescue them by taking them over to someone else's house. There was a point in time where I took them, because I wasn't allowed to be alone with them, he wouldn't allow it. I ended up taking them down to my bedroom, and I locked the door and sat down to watch a movie on my laptop. He broke into the room, picked up the children screaming, crying, snot coming out of noses, no shoes, whatever the situation is, told them to run to the front of the house and took them away to the other person's house.
What did you do?
I cried. And I documented a lot. That's one thing that helps me was journaling. I had a digital document that I kept track of it all.
Good for you. And this is huge. If you're in this situation, to be documenting every single time this stuff happens, I'm sure this has helped you in court.
Well, that's another story.
Okay.
It helped me to process reality versus what I had been told. And it helped me work through the trauma of it. And it helped me to realize how bad it was.
Yes. That's really good, though, because when you said it helps you to process reality, because they do try to gaslight you and tell you that didn't happen. But when you have it in pen and paper.
Exactly.
That's excellent. Yes.
I thought it, word to the wise, I thought that my document was safe on my computer. He somehow got a hold of my backup drive and downloaded my hard drive to his computer. I overlooked his shoulder one day when he was on his computer and realized he had taken my backup hard drive, and had copied it and put it on his desktop.
So do you suggest a different way that would be safe?
Maybe password protected.
Okay.
I thought it was safe because my computer was password protected, but somehow he got it. There's a long history of a lot of trauma that he caused with our children. In the year that I had separated in-house, a family member got sick, came to town, and ended up dying in the hospital nearby. So there was reunion for me that allowed me to have some closure with some things that had happened in my childhood. But at the same time, that was an extra trauma that happened all in the same month. And another thing was he created a bunch of conflict over homeschool. While he had invited the homeschool subject and had supported it, he then flipped it and took it away. He took them to the school and registered them for public school against my wishes. And he also involved church people in that, and they did not knowing what was going on, went along with it. The pastor that I had at the time supported him, did not support me at all, sent us to marriage counseling.
Oh, that'll help.
That did not help at all. That ended up going really
Shocker.
bad.
Yeah.
And the counselor, not knowing what was going on, recommended that I get mentally evaluated.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not. So I knew there was nothing wrong with me, but because of the pressure between the two of them, I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with getting checked out. I felt like I didn't have a choice.
Well, yeah, and at this point, you probably felt like he was making you crazy.
Well, yes. And I was very depressed because that family member had died, and us having to go through the property, through the estate, and trying to deal with closing that estate, which was in another state. So there was a lot. There's a lot of traumas in a short amount of time. On top of trying to homeschool the kids through the end of that school year and deal with the onslaught of smear campaign and everything else.
So did you get evaluated?
I did. And when the person interviewed me, they said, "Why are you even here?" I said, "Well, because he thinks that I'm mentally ill." He went and interviewed him, and based on his interview, my ex's interview, they admitted me. My ex said that I was not a reliable historian.
Can nobody recognize abuse anymore?
No, no. I mean, it has been, I am now 7 years post-divorce, and it has still continued. I mean, he still tries to say I'm mentally ill. So he got me admitted. Granted, they recognized that it was domestic violence. I had been to a domestic violence counselor who spoke to the social worker there. And they actually sought to protect me when he unannounced came to the hospital and was acting so awful that they almost called the police on him. They actually had me escorted to another person's house instead of going home.
How long were you there for?
Less than 48 hours. I wasn't on any medications or anything like that. So, I mean, he didn't have anything to go on.
How did you eventually find, and when did you find Leslie?
I found Leslie through a pastor friend that I had known for a really long time. I called this person because I trusted him. And I said, "This is what's going on." Like, what in the world? And he's like, "This is classic abuse." I was like, "Oh, it is?" He's like, "Yeah, this is classic abuse." And he had heard of Leslie and recommended Leslie to me. So I looked up Leslie online, on Facebook and on her website, started listening to some of her webinars, heard about Conquer, and got brave and joined.
Wow.
And here's one thing that I struggle understanding, and I fell into the same thing. I felt like I had to inform him, almost ask his permission to join a support group. So I did the same thing. But when I hear people saying, "Well, I need to tell him I'm going to divorce," or "I need to tell him I'm filing," or "I need to tell him..."
I wouldn't tell this guy if I was going to the bathroom.
Yeah, exactly. Things are better known in hindsight. So when you're in that moment, I totally get it. But I wish I had been brave enough to say, you know what? I don't have to tell him. So what if the charge shows up on the credit card?
Yeah.
I don't owe him an explanation, but I didn't feel I had that permission.
Did you feel like if he saw a charge on the credit card, you'd be in trouble or even in danger?
Probably not danger, but I felt like I would hear about it and it would be a point of contention. So it's part of that mental gymnastics of trying to appease him that process that I was going through.
It really was a brave step for you to do it.
Yeah. And my BHAG was to file for divorce.
BHAG meaning big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yes. Yes.
And that is something Leslie talks about in Conquer.
Yes.
So share what your BHAG was.
That was to file for divorce, to get brave and take that step. Because to take a step against and outside of what an abuser wants is scary.
It's very scary.
It is very scary. So I did not tell him I was going to divorce him. That one I got brave and didn't tell him. I saw an attorney and just did it. And he got the paperwork apparently.
Oh my gosh.
And the next morning he brought out a grocery bag and said he had gotten sick to his stomach. And it was the contents.
Come on.
Nope. And the kids were right there. And he goes to my son, "Oh, are you feeling sick too?" And I was like, "What? Are you kidding?"
How old was your son at this time?
7.
I mean, just hearing that, I'm like, that was truly brave. You learned a lot of other things, though. I think, didn't you say you even got a printer from Goodwill?
I did.
Yeah.
Instead of using the printer that was upstairs, I got myself a printer from Goodwill. I also got myself a Keurig for $8, by the way, from Goodwill.
I'm telling you what, Goodwill, I've just discovered it here recently, and there's some good stuff there.
I didn't have a lot of money. So, you do what you got to do. The printer didn't come with a cord, and I ended up finding a cord and got it all working.
And you printed off the handouts.
I did. I didn't bring it in here to show you, but I have got a thick binder of all of her printouts. From all of her online videos, the teaching videos.
Tell me, because this is so key in Conquer, that you've got to do your work.
Yes.
And it's not just about joining the Facebook group and hoping some kind of magic happens. Like you have to really do the program, do the work. And the community is just an incredible bonus and support.
Yes.
But in all of the work that you did, can you share maybe a couple of the things that you really grasped onto and that changed Rose?
I would say, while I knew I wasn't perfect, I knew it wasn't me causing this. I knew it was his problem. And that helped reframing. Reframing is something that has really helped to take a situation that trauma speaks a message. And when I love how Leslie talks about how you got to see it through God's perspective and not through an abuser's or the world's perspective. When you reframe it through God's lens, see it through God's lens, you get a different story, or at least you can, depending on what the situation is. And that helped me getting brave and standing up and being strong, being secure in who I am and who God's teaching me to be.
I can see in your situation where that would be so huge, and where you would truly need to be brave because you were living in fear.
Yes, very much so. Knowing he could break in at my room anytime and hurt me. While he hadn't been overtly physical abusive, there was a point in time where he nearly ran us into another vehicle with just him and me in the car intentionally. So there was that fear that had actually happened in the process of this separation time. There was a lot of fear.
I hope you didn't get in the car with him again.
No, because the verbal aggression became so bad, and he was exposing the kids to it, I decided to not ride with him ever again. We had 2 vehicles, so I would take the other vehicle. It was shortly after that the air conditioner suddenly had debris and wouldn't work. And the sliding doors on the Odyssey wouldn't work. It made the vehicle go down to like a 0 value. And then he got the kids to ride with him because the air conditioning was out and it was hot outside. So there's this constant competition.
Do you think that he sabotaged your vehicle?
Yes. I can't prove it. But since, he had access to it.
Mm. What are your kids doing? Because it seems like they experienced a lot of trauma.
They don't recognize it. They
Really?
don't. It's gotten better in the last year. So they're teenagers now, and they know that there's unhealthiness there on his side, but I think they still see those perceived good attributes, even though they're fake.
Mm.
They want to see the best in him.
Sure.
And they don't fully grasp the trauma that they went through. I think kids tend to block that kind of stuff out when it's a young age.
Right. Can you tell me, you've described a lot of people-pleasing behaviors, a lot of walking on eggshells.
Oh, yeah.
How are you different today than before you came across Conquer?
I'm a lot stronger. Now live to please God, not him. I don't answer to him. I don't owe him an explanation. I think those people-pleasing things have pretty much left me, if not totally.
You also learned in Conquer how to tell if somebody knew their behavior was destructive. Talk about that.
Leslie has talked about, as one of the awesome things that helped me when I was first discovering what was going on. And I'm probably not going to say this like she would, but basically, if someone's being destructive and right in that time somebody comes to the door, would they behave differently? And if the answer is yes, they can control it, that then it's intentional. And he was like that.
Right.
He was completely different around other people. But when he came up to me, even at church, and if it was just me, he would be verbally abusive. But around other people, he was a great guy.
And to this day, he does not see or acknowledge any of his behavior as having been abusive?
None. He point blank told me he will never admit that he's abusive. Because he's not.
Wow. What advice would you give to this woman who's experiencing similar things in her marriage?
Oh, for one, my heart breaks for you. Truly breaks. I don't wish this on anybody or on you. You deserve so much more. You don't deserve to be treated this way. I would say you need to do everything you can to get out of his control, to stand on your 2 feet and be brave and strong, even when you don't feel like it, and to get help. Conquer is an amazing place. It has been such a life-changing, life-affirming program, and with such immense friends, it is well worth the investment in you and in your future. Leslie's teaching, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's so incredible. I was able to meet people in my local area in person, and to meet people face to face when you're in the midst of this is just incredible. You're not alone. There are people to walk with you and to validate what you're going through. So yes, please join Conquer. You will not regret it.
What are your hopes and goals right now for the future? You're still kind of in this process of custody issues and court battles. But as you look down the road, what do you see for yourself and your kids?
I see hope. My kids are old enough now where I can see life outside of parenting plans and custody and his control. I look at it with hope, not just for me, but for my kids as well, where they are not forced to live with someone who's maltreating them and abusing them. The end of his control over them is nearing the end, that the light is at the end of the tunnel. So I am at the point where I was out of Conquer for a while and I rejoined because I want every bit of toxicity out of me, every bit of trauma. I don't want any of the negative. I only want to, it's like, I can't get rid of what's happened, but it does shape me into a better person when I've allowed it to do that. So I'm going to take the positive of what God has done in me and through me and who he's helped me to become and use that to propel me forward into the life, whatever it is, that God has for me. And if I can be a healthier, better person and be that positive role model and example for my kids, then that's going to be helpful for them too, not just to recognize the difference, the stark difference between my ex and me, but also on how they should live their lives.
I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
As you do, I want you to know that I see that hope, and I know that that's going to happen in your future because you are so resilient and you have found such strength and you have inspired me, and I know women listening as well. So thank you for being brave enough to come on and share this story in a public way, because it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. And if I could share one more thing.
Please.
I think a lot of my growth is due to being intentional. Like you were saying, you can't just join Conquer in the Facebook group and expect something magic to happen. You do have to put the work into it. I spend a lot of time with God and intentionally working on, God, what do I need to change? Listening to him, learning, listening to wise others, just soaking in everything I can. There's a lot of intentional hard work with perseverance that I am doing, even outside of Conquer, to try to help be that better person. And yes, I've made my mistakes. There's things I regret, but God has done his work, and for that I am thankful.
Doing that work that you're talking about is possible for anybody, because that's the kind of work that's 100% in your control. So if you have a husband that's controlling you leaving the house or leaving a room or controlling you in so many ways, he can't control this.
No.
And your personal growth is within your control. So yes, take that control. Take that ability, because the only person that you can change is yourself. But when you do, that does change the dynamics of the relationship.
And it can make it worse because he doesn't like it, but it sets you free.
It sets you free.
It is, and it sets you free, and hopefully will set children free as well.
Absolutely. Rose, thank you so much for being here.
You are welcome. Thank you for letting me speak.
What an incredible story of resilience. And like we said, your personal growth is 100% within your control. Conquer is your support to making it really happen. Please take a courageous step and join. Go to leslievernick.com/join. This is also the year of our Conquer Conference. Oh, and our topic? It's building resilience. The conference is only open to members of the Conquer support group. In addition to Leslie, we will have special guests like Lisa Turkhurst, Chris Moles, and Nagme Panahi. There will be incredible teaching, relationship building, and fun. Doors close October 4th, so join now. There are hundreds of ladies waiting to welcome, pray for, and support you. Until next time, may God bless all of your relationships with Him, with yourself, and with others.